that's who owns those wind farms. And we went, oh my God, this is ridiculous. And so we said, well, let's do something about it, and we started working on seabed legislation. So we are based in Woodstock, Minnesota. Let me give you this. Now, types of what we're talking about, there's types of development are the large utility-dominated wind farms. They're usually great big wind farms. And when they're 100 megawatts or 1,000 megawatts, there's really not any 1,000 megawatt wind farms out there. Most wind farms are usually 50, 75, 80, 100 megawatts on the large scale. And then there's the seabed, community-based energy development projects. And Minnesota was pretty much a leader in that. We passed our first seabed legislation in 2005. And then we had to go back in 2007 and kind of fix it a little bit, because once some of the bigger players saw that, they said, well, we want to be seabed. And so they tried to fuzzy the math a little bit and tried to get in there to do that. So we had to fix it. But you can see that the projects that are community-based projects, we really bring the economic benefits to the communities and to the farmers, and we keep those energy dollars in there. And we use all local talent when we build these wind farms. We use the local cement guys, we use the local electricians, we use the local bankers, the lawyers, to bring everybody into this development, into the revenue streams of these projects. And then obviously the landowners and the farmers that live there own it. And we pretty much pioneered the whole concept of this community-based development, and mainly because of my years of experience in working with the Europeans and seeing how it was really done. And one of the things we developed was called the flip model. And for all of you economic students, this is an important thing. And the thing you have to remember about wind energy in the United States of America is that the federal incentives that are put out there for us to develop our wind resources, our renewable energy resources, are completely geared at who? Corporate America. What else is new? And so we had to come up with ways on how to utilize this. And when I say they're geared at corporate America, the federal production tax credit, which is the incentive that the federal government puts out there for us to develop wind power, is right now it's about 2 cents per kilowatt hour in tax credit. And so that means if you produce a kilowatt hour of electricity with wind or solar, you get 2 cents per kilowatt hour for that. And that's a pretty nice incentive. The problem is that you and I can't use it, because it's basically geared at passive income rules and subject to the alternative minimum tax, unless you're a C Corp. If you're a big C corporation, there are no rules. And so for you and I to garner ourselves together to try to put together the economics of building a wind farm, it's very difficult, because we cannot use the federal incentives that make this stuff happen economically. And so what we did with our work is we came up with what's called the flip model. You see it right there. And basically what that means is that we bring in an equity partner to partner with the community, and that equity partner can use the tax credits. And so we bring them in, they partner with the community, they use the tax values out of the project, the cash flows mainly to the communities, and then after 10 years, once the credits are used up, because the credits are a 10-year package, that partner rolls out. Now there's a big difference between a tax equity partner and just an equity player in the game of wind power. And we can speak a little more about that here. Okay, the financial benefits of this is what are the benefits of this project? The financial benefits of the ownership stay in the community. And you know, that's a big deal. The jobs are great. I mean, the construction jobs, the management jobs, the operations jobs, the maintenance jobs, they're all great jobs. But the real value is keeping the energy dollar, the revenue stream off of the turbines in the community. And that's the difference between community-based and regular-based. And you can see, you can reiterate all this stuff all over again, but we use the construction. The projects create more support for local contractors and engineers, so it helps all the way across the spectrum. And the result is basically more dollars per megawatt circulating in the community. Now we weren't the only ones that saw this. Once we started doing this and started pushing community-based development, the GAO, the Government Accounting Office, came out and they said, what are you guys doing out here in Minnesota? What's all this hubbub about community ownership and what's the difference? And so they did some studies, and you can see they did part of their study, they compared a 40 megawatt project in Pipestone County where we live, and if it's owned by a large multinational or a large utility out-of-state entity, it generates around $650,000 of new income into the community. No, that's not bad. That's not bad. But if that same project was owned locally through community-based development, it generates $3.3 million annually. That's a big difference. And so their evaluation, they looked at 3 counties in Iowa and in Minnesota, and they show that the local ownership provides 2.5 times more jobs and 3.7 times more local dollar impact to the communities. And that is why community-based development should be really seriously looked at when you're developing your wind resources. Now, Nebraska has got a great wind resource, but you haven't really developed it yet compared to the other states around you. And that's not good, but then it is good, because you still have the opportunity to use wind energy as an economic development tool that'll create long-term revenue streams for your communities and keep your energy dollars in your community. And if you refer back to what I said about where I live, in those three little counties in southwest Minnesota, and we export $100 million a year. Just think if that money stayed in our communities, what a difference that would have on the long-term economic health and wealth of our communities. Wow, what happened? Oh, this thing skips fast. Okay, what does this mean for the stakeholders? Now, one thing I wanted to mention about the way we structure the contracts, on these, the seabed contracts in Minnesota, they're called front-loaded net present value contracts. Because when you're buying wind energy or you're selling wind energy, it's a 20-year contract. It's not a 1-year contract or a 2-year contract, it's 20 years. So you have to look at this as the net present value over the life of the contract. And what we do with seabed is we say, we need a little bit more cash in the front end to cover our debt service payments. But once we cover that debt, we can reduce the price of energy, because once the debt's gone, you do not need as much money to cover your expenses and make a profit as an owner. And so we front load the contracts, and then so it's up here, and then it drops after 10 years, and then it's like that. And so you look at the net present value of that contract, that's what dictates the prices. And so if you take a 4-cent contract, 4 cents per kilowatt hour net present value on a seabed type contract, what you get is you get, for the ratepayers, you get clean, sustainable, long-term, low-cost electricity that is not subject to fuel adjustment clauses or any environmental penalties. And if you have seen the local or the latest thing, I think it was in the New York Times yesterday, where the EPA has basically said that we need to do something with carbon dioxide. And that's a big exposure to any utility that has coal generation. But if you have renewable energy in your system, you hedge your bet on that. And so from the standpoint of a ratepayer, you're locking yourself in. You have to remember, with wind power or solar power or any of the renewable technologies, you're basically buying your energy up front. The cost of energy is the cost of capital to put the machinery in the ground. There's no fuel, there's no waste, there's no emissions, there's no transportation fuel, there's none of the other things that drive up our energy costs with renewable energy. And so that's a big value to us ratepayers. And so if we do a front-loaded net present value contract and we pay a little bit more in the front years, in the back years, our energy is very cheap. And that goes back to what I talked about earlier in the Europeans, and their philosophy was that. They're saying, well, let's invest in renewable energy, because once we pay for the machinery, our energy is going to be very cheap.